Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am Jocelyn Turner. So wonderful to be joining everyone tonight. Dr. Kane, how are you doing this lovely Tuesday evening?
I am doing quite well. Your description of lovely is just uh, copacetic and enough that it's nice and cool outside. But more importantly, I got both feet firmly planted on the ground and I'm here. Okay, instead of being under the ground, let me put it that way. So I am very excited again to have this show. I think I've experienced some of this personally, and I'm happy to have the guest. We still have one missing. Actually, it's our fault, but she'll be back joining with us. But I am most certainly happy to have Miss Taylor here, and I'll let you introduce and talk to Miss Taylor from this point.
All right, good evening. I am Tammy Taylor, Chief Program Officer with Hubbard House. I have been with Hubbard House now for 18 years. In September 23rd, I celebrate my 18th year there and have worked in many of the programs that I am now supervising and have the senior leadership over. So our children's program and our shelter, so many services that we provide, I am now supervising. Yes, thank you. And
Thank
Hubbard
you.
House, for those who are not familiar with Hubbard House, we are the Certified Domestic Violence Center serving Duval and Baker counties. And so we provide shelter services for victims and survivors of domestic violence and their families.
All right, you and Dr. Kane went a little ahead of the game. I wanted to just kind of bring you in on the intro and say tonight's topic, we're talking about the
Okay.
silent suffering of victims of domestic violence. Dr. Kane went a little ahead of the game, but thank you for telling our guests a little bit about you as well as about Hubbard House. And we'll get back to that in a second. Also joining us tonight, as you can see on the screen, is Latrina Dowdell, and she is here to tell her story. It's probably a story that nobody wants to tell, quite frankly, but she is willingly agreed to share her story. How are you doing tonight, Latrina?
I'm great. Thank you for asking.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, again, tonight's topic is not one that many of us want to talk about, but I'm so happy that our guests have agreed to come on. At any point, to our audience, at any point during the discussion, if you have a question, chime in at 888-669-1280. Again, that's 888-669-1280. And throughout tonight's show, we are going to put the number up for you to call in, or you can type in a question if you'd like. So let's go ahead and Tammy, I hope it's okay if I call you Tammy. Tammy, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned that you have been working with Hubbard House for 17 years. Tell me a little bit about what should people, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. When we
Yes.
talk about domestic violence awareness, what's the one thing that comes to mind for you of what people should be aware about when it comes to domestic violence?
There are many things. If I had to sum it up, I would just say to survivors that you are not alone. I would speak to the survivor and let them know that um, you don't have to be afraid to call for help, that there is help available, and we are ready and available to you at any time that you're ready to give us and reach out to us for life-saving, life-changing services with Hubbard House. I would say to those who support survivors, to do just that, to support survivors and not blame survivors by asking, what did you do? Why did you do this? Those are blaming questions. But you too can contact Hubbard House through our hotline and through our outreach services to get information on how to help a family member, a friend, or someone that you know that is experiencing domestic violence.
So when I was looking up the topic, as we begin each show, Dr. Kane and I do our homework. We never profess to knowing everything. And I looked up domestic violence in terms of the types of domestic violence. And the first thing that this line says is it isn't just physical. It
Correct.
includes physical, of course, but it also includes sexual abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse,
Mm-hmm.
and financial abuse. I was
Absolutely.
quite frankly, and I get it, it's a controlling thing, controlling the
Absolutely.
household finances and expenses and what that person is. And I was reminded years ago when I was doing a focus group. I don't know about why when I read that at this very moment, it reminded me of doing a focus group with a group of young ladies about this particular. It was about female issues,
Okay.
and we compensated them at the end. And the one young lady said, "I wish I could keep this money." And I'm young and naive. I was like, "Oh, you can. It's for you." She said, "No, my husband is outside. He drove me here. He told me to hand him that money as soon as I get in the car." And of course the other young lady spoke up. She's like, they were like, "You don't have to give him your money." And she said, "Oh, yes, I do, because he might hurt me if I don't." Listen, the sisters in the room, they said, "Wait a minute, hold on. We'll go out to the car with you." They start taking their earrings off and and ready to hop in. And she was like, "No, no, no, don't do that." And
Absolutely.
they rallied around her and said, "Do we need to call somebody for you? You don't have to go outside to your car." She said, "No, I'll be okay. He doesn't hit me, but he just controls how much money I get to spend." And so that story I was reminded of when I saw financial abuse. Trina, tell us your story, if you don't mind, whatever you want to share. No particular part of it.
Okay, well, abuse started for me when I was pregnant. I was pregnant early at 17, and it was my first boyfriend. And as I look back on it now, I didn't know anything about ovulation or any of this, but we had planned this ultimate plan to have our first encounter for my 17th birthday. And just so happens 9 months later, there was a baby. But during that time, before November came, I got to know a different part of the person that I so-called loved, because it was different for him. He was embarrassed as a man because he wasn't able to, I guess, attain the things that he wanted to attain, because to him, I was interrupting that, with the situation with the baby. So I remember going to the Riverwalk, because back then that's where everybody used to go and meet up at the Riverwalk in Jacksonville. And everybody's cars all lined up. I'm ready to go on my little date. And I remember I got out of the car and he saw what I had on, and I was about 6 months. And he asked me, "What do you have on? I'm not going anywhere with you with that on." And I thought I would look good. I had planned for that day. I had my makeup right, everything. And he made me get back in the car. And we started arguing in the car. And I remember him punching me in the top of my head. And my tears shot out my face. And he thought that it was blood coming from my nose, but it was just the impact shocked me. And so tears just shot out of my face. And I started crying. And he immediately tried to grab me and tell me he was sorry and that it would never happen again. But that was the beginning. Since I let that happen that one time, I didn't know that was the beginning of being drugged downstairs, or anytime I didn't agree with them, backhand slapped in public. And it had gotten really bad. I wear scars on my face with stitches it's gotten really bad. So
At the time, did you share it with anyone?
I would not tell anybody because my grandparents is the ones who raised me. My mom had me at 14, so my relationship with my grandparents, was the ones who raised me. So when I told them initially, my grandmother wanted to know what I did wrong because I was pregnant now. So I have to swallow whatever's going on because this is what I've gotten myself into, and I can't embarrass the family any further because I'm not married, and whatever I need to do, I need to make this work. So I started hiding. I had a black eye one time, and I stayed at his mother's house until it was gone, and then it just continued on after that. His mom kept asking me what I was doing wrong, and I always thought that it was something I was doing wrong. But I later learned, as I've grown through my healing, that I didn't fight back. I let the system tell me that I was abusing him because that's how it looked when he threw me out on Beach Boulevard. On the side of the road, another car saw him throw me out, and the lady in the van picked me up and took me to a gas station and asked me, did I need her to call the police? And she did. She sat there with me, but he had driven up further to Regency Square and gotten the officers there at Regency Square. They had like this security place there in the front of Regency where the officers were. He stopped those officers there. Just so happened, I realized that once those officers came back to release me to the Jacksonville Beach police officer, released me to the JSO officer because I was from Jacksonville. So when they released me to that officer, I remember that face, the face of that man was a friend of his. So now I'm going from danger to danger. I went in the back of the police car and I never came out. He took me straight to jail. And I remember the next morning, the police, the judge telling me that my baby's father had called and said he was sorry that that happened to me, but I can't keep putting my hands on him.
Wow. Tammy, tell me, what does the typical abuser look like?
Well, there's actually no physical sign that you can see. Dr. Kane is pointing to identify a person who is an abuser. Unfortunately, they just don't put it on their foreheads. They don't advertise that they are abusers. Actually, at the beginning, it is usually very loving, very charming, because that's the honeymoon phase. They usually move pretty quickly in relationships, though, kind of sweep you off of your feet. But some of and that can happen in every relationship. So what we try to make sure people understand is when we're in a relationship, we check in with one another. But how can that become unhealthy when it is that you have to report everywhere that you go? You have to check in when you arrive. Who is there? As Latrina said, what are you wearing? Why are you wearing that? Is it because of a specific person at your job or where you're going? So those are the signs that you look for in the relationship that becomes unhealthy. And sometimes we see it, we recognize it, but we may think it's endearing, that they want to be with me all the time. They want me to be the first person they talk to every morning and the last person that they talk to on the phone. But then in the midst of those conversations, it is questioning, what are you doing? Where are you going? Who are you with? You got to tell me what you're doing, and things of that nature. So that's what causes it to be an unhealthy relationship. And so again, there are no signs on a person that's going to make you aware that they are an abuser.
Well, Ms. Taylor, I just want to make sure I just explain what I wanted to myself, and not because I am
right. I understand,
but that it can there is no specific
There's no.
stereotypical face to the abuser. So
Absolutely.
I could be, I'm not, but I could be an abuser just as well as a behind the scenes person or my co-host. There is
Absolutely.
there is no specific stereotypical face to an abuser.
And I think the thing that was shocking to me when Latrina was talking is everybody along the way questioned what did she do to invoke that abuse against her. And so and we have a question that's posted. How often is the abuser a woman or female? Have you ever, Dr. Kane, even in your practice, or Tammy, have you ever heard of a female abuser?
Absolutely. We do service. Absolutely. We do know is disproportionately more women are victims than there are men. However, it is underreported with men who are abusers. But we at Hubbard House do service our male survivors as well. So the services are available for all victims of domestic violence.
So what does someone do if they feel that they're being abused? What's the first thing that they should do when they make the, and forgive me, Latrina, when I say this, no disrespect to you. I'm learning as I ask the questions. If someone is being abused and they want to seek help, should they pick up the phone and look for Hubbard House, or should they call a family member? Should they call the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office? What do you advise them to do, Tammy?
I would advise them to do what they feel is the safest thing for them. If it is contacting a family member first, that could be a part of. At Hubbard House, we set up safety plans. That is the very first thing that we do with survivors when they call us, when they contact us, either by phone, by text, and or through our outreach program. We're doing that safety planning with them. So if it is safer for them to contact a family member so that that family member can contact us to get help for them and or to call the police for them, that is what we want that survivor to do. We want the survivor to know that there is help. That's number one. We want them to know that there is help. And whatever means they feel is the safest for them to get that help, that's the avenue that we want them to utilize. If they do contact a family member and that family member is not educated, they do what Latrina experienced, is asking, what did you do? You've got to stick it out. That's your husband, or that's your wife, or the parent of your children. So you need to work it out. We want them to call someone else and seek us out. Yes, look for Hubbard House and give us a call.
Do you find that some abusers, rather than, that they move from the spouse or mate, then to start abusing the children? Have you ever heard of an instance like that, or threatened to abuse the children?
Let me ask, how many abusers subsequently become abusers themselves? Is there a percentage that you're aware of? Some statistics on that?
Ask that question again, Dr. King.
Are you aware of any statistics that show people that are being abused that then become abusers themselves? That's a better way to clarify that.
I don't have any statistics on that. What I will say is that when we experience trauma, and as survivors who do experience that trauma, are experiencing that trauma, they may react as in trauma as well. So, but I don't have any statistics on survivors becoming abusers. Yeah, I don't have any statistics on it.
Ms. Turner, you asked about men. It's just, being abused. I've noticed the overwhelming majority of sex, the sex that is being abused of, females. But I have some patients where they were abused by their spouse, the female, and because they don't hit women, the woman just felt the freedom to hit this person as much as they wanted to, how they wanted to. And of course, men, we take the position, I won't, tolerate that. What is wrong with you? And then, of course, the women would, always look at what our guest has said, what Ms. Dowler said. What did you do to cause him to abuse, to cause her to abuse you from the male perspective?
So, Latrina, back to you. What happened that made you move from I'm tired of being abused by this person to I need to get help?
Well, what happened is I was pregnant with my second child. He and I hadn't seen each other because I was going through, at this point, courthouse advocate is what helped me, because they had me going through classes as if I was the abuser, right? And I had a Hubbard House court advocate, Brooke Ashley. She was, she stayed with me, and she knew that I was going through something because she saw me limping in court. She knew that I was abused. And so she stayed with me, even though they gave me 6 months of probation for abusing him. Later in that 6 months, he came back, went through the window, and came in because he saw a guy at my house. And we were standing in the living room. And he came through, in his document, he came through the house, and I had to actually fight that night. He told the guy to leave, and we're standing in the living room. First guy just came in the house, and that night, he told the guy to leave, and I asked him not to leave because I was scared that I was going to be beat up. But when he left, as soon as he left, he acted as if he was going to reason with me. I'm telling him, we're just standing here in the living room. Nothing happened. We're not together either, but this is what he wants control, So I'm standing in the living room. All I know is back then there was a telephone cord, because this was 98. And he snatched the telephone cord from the wall because I was trying to reach for the phone to call my grandmother. And he snatched it and he put that cord around my neck and started yanking me like an animal. And I tried to crawl to the kitchen to try to get loose from him, to find something to fight back. And what the end of our relationship, the very end of this trauma, was that there was a barbecue pitchfork that I reached for, and he got it. And he's trying to stab me in my leg. But while we were tussling for this, he fell on it, and it collapsed his lung. All I know is the police was called because we were living in this condo out Pearl Street. The police was called by the neighbors because they heard all the noise that was going on. And it took me months to prove that I was innocent. But they finally found out that he said that he lived there. They found none of his clothes there. All of the background information they looked up for him. And they found out that he was lying about everything. He had other women that he had beat up as well. Now, he had a record that I didn't know he had, beating up other women. So he was seeing other people. So he was doing this to other women. And they dropped the charges on me. He's still my kid's father. But later on in 2004, he was killed, shot and killed in what they said that it was. He was a habitual drug offender. But that's what they said it was. But the girl that he was with was covered in blood that morning. And she was a Caucasian girl. And nobody ever researched what happened to him. But I know what happened that night.
I will ask, you raised the point. So what are some of the red flags or the warning signs of an abuser? Ms. Taylor, since you seem to deal with that on a daily basis, can you answer that?
So again, as I stated earlier, some of the signs of unhealthy relationships would be recording how long it takes you to get home, having to check in, and there is a consequence for not doing those things. Also, earlier, Ms. Turner talked about the financial abuse as well. In some relationships, we've seen where the abuser is the sole financial provider of the family and feel, for instance, we had a family that was in shelter. The primary financial resource was the husband in the relationship. He made the money, but for food and groceries for the wife and the children was a family pack of chicken wings, um, some type of rice and corn. That is all that they were allowed to have for a week. That was the meal every week. So when the mom and the children were able to get away and come into shelter, the children went through an adjustment period of learning other foods because they had not been provided other foods. So red flags such as that, isolation, definitely isolating you from family and friends, telling you that if you call for help, no one is going to believe you. Your family won't believe you. Friends will not believe you because they don't display those behaviors in front of others. Um, when a situation gets to where it is really escalated and that is a lethal situation, then the abuser usually will in public also abuse. And so that's one of the most dangerous times in a relationship, when the abuser no longer does it behind closed doors, but out in public as well. So those are some red flags.
To kind of recap what you're saying, is it sounds like extreme jealousy, possessiveness, unpredictability, as they say. It's as Miss Turner said, I did my pre pre podcast research. Verbal abuse, cruelty, even cruelty to your dog, to your cat, whatever your family pet may be.
Yes, the family pet, property as well.
Yep, and like
And
you said,
it's the blaming. To me, it's blaming others for their problems. That's what I hear that people say. If something didn't go right in their
Yes.
life, then they come home and, want to blame the person at home or persons at home. Latrina, you're shaking your head. Is that right for you?
Yes, he shot up the engine in my car so I couldn't leave.
do you think
I still had to pay that car note for 2 years.
do you think that was kind of that exhibited a certain of an inadequacy of himself, because he felt he was a failure? He wanted to blame someone else.
I learned later on, after he's passed, and I have a relationship with his family because, like I said, I have 2 children with him. And I learned that his mother was abused by his dad the same way, but she didn't share that with me when I was going through it. She made me feel like it was my fault that I was going through it. When all she had to do is explain her story, then I would have been able to connect and understand what was happening to me. She made me feel like I was doing it to myself. So we have since healed from that. She's apologized. She was in pain herself, she said, because she was in an abusive relationship. And we didn't have these conversations until after her husband passed away. You're muted.
Dr. Kane, you're muted.
I was going to ask you, are you seeing a generational difference with regards to that, in terms of, like Ms. Dowdell has reported, that the time, the era that she had, that especially doing that kind of abuse, there was a whole lot of blaming and a whole generalized fashion. There was a lot of blaming of the victim. And has that changed any? I mean, I'm out of the generation that, it was an accepted belief that, it was accepted that men could do this to their spouses. Not saying it was right, but
Right.
it was at that time, that era, that generational era. It was a lot more accepted at that time than hopefully than now.
The male superiority still exists today. And some relationships and survivors that we service, they're still experiencing that. I'm the man of the house. I'm the breadwinner of the house, and it is acceptable. You are the weaker vessel. You're to do what I tell you to do. And so those things are still in existence today.
Have you found, Ms. Taylor, that COVID-19 made things worse for victims of domestic violence?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because being in the house isolated um, increased our calls for help. And it also was the driving force for us to create a text line for survivors to contact us via text for a safer way for them to contact us.
And during my years at the my public health experience, I just remember as you all were both talking, I'm reminded of instances of how abuse was in so many different forms. I met a young lady years ago. She kept getting pregnant, and I'm talking to her about, responsible sexual behavior and, or in that case, in her instance, reproductive health and choosing what birth control options to use, because she kept saying, I didn't want to get pregnant anymore. Oh my God, I'm pregnant again. And so I'm sharing with her the different options that she had. And she said, my husband won't let me use birth control. And me being the feisty young, I started out in public health at age 23. So I'm like, let you. And I had to catch myself like, okay, I'm not talking to my girlfriend. This is a client, right? Because I'm like, let you. What do you mean, let you? That was hard for me to understand at that time. I'm like, let you. And then, of course, then I shared with her the different options that were available to her, like at the time it may have been Depo or something like that. And correct me, Dr. Kane, if I'm wrong, that there is some, she didn't have to take a pill or use a, a device or anything, that she could get a shot in order to reduce the likelihood of getting pregnant. But she was just devastated. She kept year after year after year, she kept having babies. And you can see that she was a younger woman. She was tired. And so I think about different forms of domestic violence. One of the things that someone asked Latrina is, so how are things with your family now?
Well, they say there's someone that is always born within the generation that make changes, and I guess that's me. I came in with a problem. My mom was 14 when she gave birth to me, and I never understood why I lived with my grandparents, because I thought a rejection and abandonment, that was my trauma growing up. But I learned after the generation, after my grandparents passed away, I was able to have a relationship with my mother to understand what happened to her, because I always blamed her for the things that went on with me. Like, you could have saved me, you could have helped me. And I learned that she was afraid to speak. She was 14 and blamed for what happened to her when she was violated. I marinated through an unwanted pregnancy because of a child that was violated and didn't have a voice to say somebody hurt me, because she was blamed as being grown. You deserved it. You shouldn't have went this place. My mom told me things that I didn't learn while my grandmother was alive for me to ask questions. But I was always told how I should feel about her. So I had a bad opinion of her growing up. And it took me so much time to forgive her and forgive myself for feeling that way about her, and understanding that we all do the best we can, with what we have. I've learned a lot about secure attachments And so my children had secure attachments because I made sure that they were secure and not feeling unwanted and feeling loved all the time. And so my children still have some issues because they saw the abuse that I went through. You know, my oldest son is now 28, and he works through his anger because that was my fear, thinking that that would happen and he would be, you know, hurting a girl, and she would have to call me and tell me what my son did to her, and I was going to believe it, you know, because I know what sometimes you become what you hate. And because that's the pattern that our community goes through. There's a lot of things that happen. I live in 32209. And that's what made me want to start a nonprofit organization for my community, was because I see all of these people around me. The world thinks they know exactly why people do what they do, but they don't understand that they are somebody's children. And the child in them is still crying out for attention because it's never been resolved. And so they continue to grow in age in that pain. And then they're putting that off on someone else trying to tell their story. So through the experience and through the 32209 experience, we are telling our stories. We're going through our process. We're healing the unhealed places within us and telling our truths. And we're using our experiences now to write a dissertation for the generations to come, how to fix the problem instead of be a part of it. So that's what we're doing around here.
And thank you. And Miss Taylor, the one thing that she said just resonated with me is the generational.
Yeah.
This is generational. She went back to her mom and the abuse that started with her and how she was conceived, and then her children's father, mother, and the abuse that she was experiencing. Do you find in the work that you do that there is a lot of generational abuse in families, or in terms of the trauma that goes along with that?
Absolutely. We have experienced that. In my 18 years with Hubbard House, I have seen children who came in. When I first started there, I was the lead child advocate there. And I have seen the children that I have serviced when they were there with their non-abusive parent, service them as an adult. So it does happen. It's not a true indicator that if someone is in a home where violence is taking place, that they will become an abuser or be in a relationship where they are being abused, but it does occur. And as I say, in 18 years, I have seen a lot and have serviced a lot of people where I've seen that happen.
Miss Turner, I just want to kind of just go back to something you said about the young lady who looked like she was pregnant every year. And, in my generation, in the generation preceding, I'm not sure about the current generations. But one of the things that was always said was barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen can help protect you or protect your relationship as being the man in that woman's life, because most other men did not want a woman who was pregnant, all the time, and particularly maybe had someone else's children, didn't want to take on that responsibility. So a lot of times you got the abuser. They may not have been physical beyond the point of keeping the young ladies barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kane. I was looking at some signs of abuse, and it's some things that both of you have said, but just to put it out there again, if you're just chiming in, keeping track of everything you do, where you go, and who you're with, being jealous, controlling, or angry, demeaning you, putting you down, or humiliating you in front of others, physically hurting or threatening to hurt you or your loved ones, forcing you to have sex or other intimate activity. And we talked about what you can do if you're being abused. Call 911. Really, I took it from what Ms. Taylor said. Assess your situation at that moment. It may mean what Latrina said in picking up the phone and calling a loved one, or dialing 911. But unfortunately, in her case, 911 was a part of the situation and started a nightmare for her in her journey. So let's talk about if someone is abused, let's say if they're sexually abused, for example. I read an article that said, you know, generally, you ladies, one thing we like to do is to be cleaned up and look good or whatever. Is it true that if you've been abused sexually or physically, you shouldn't clean yourself up? You should leave the marks of that person on you. So when you pick up and dial 911, you'll have proof. And that may not have come out right. So hopefully you understood the question. In other words, don't wash away the evidence. Is that right?
I would have to say for survivors who are in an intimate partner relationship where they know whom their partner is, I'm not aware of them doing rape kits for survivors who are in an actual intimate partner relationship, but sexual abuse and rape does occur even in a relationship where intimate partner relationship. So I know that that is the practice that is used for the Women's Center of Jacksonville, is what they advise, or law enforcement would advise a woman who is sexually assaulted. Um, but usually in the intimate partner relationships, the abuser is making that other party, convincing them that this is okay. You belong to me, so it's okay for me to do this to you. So a lot of times women or survivors who are in those relationships where they are being forced to do sexual acts or forced to have sex with their partner may not see it as rape until they seek help. Once seek help and they get that information, then they learn, wow, this is another level of abuse that I'm experiencing in my relationship.
One of the things, I hear on news stories, unfortunately, in that instance, and Latrina is a survivor, although it may have been a rocky road for her. She's a fighter, a survivor, as I just met her and can tell. But I see where some people who are victims of domestic violence did a restraining order on the abuser, and it just didn't seem to help. What and Latrina, you're shaking your head. Did that happen to you as well?
Yes, ma'am. It they would get around the restraining order, especially when there's children involved, because they use the children as the reason for the visit. And once you have to open the door to them because they have rights to the children, then you have intimidation. And who can you tell? It's so hard to uh, get through this when especially when there are kids involved, because they have rights as well. So it's almost as if you have to wait to live. You have to kind of wait them out in order for you to begin to live again, because the laws are protecting both sides, to make sure their rights are not being taken away, as well as trying to protect you. So it's basically, we should be more mindful of who we have our kids with. It's just the truth. But you know better, you do better.
And Ms. Carol, I'd like to thank you. I want to kind of piggyback on something, because one of the things that Dr. Kane and I have talked about throughout our podcast are inequities. And so when I hear a situation like that, I think of inequities socioeconomically. And, do you find that people who can't afford the best lawyer, for example, have a greater or less than likelihood of being treated fairly by the system than those persons who have the resources to attain the lawyers or have the influence to get help?
And that happens so often with survivors. One, times when they do call law enforcement, when they have tried to protect themselves from the abuse, and um, they have defended or tried to defend themselves, and the abuser has a scratch on them, uh, and the police officer arrives on the scene, then that survivor can be arrested because there are physical wounds on the abuser. So that happens, as it did with Miss Latrina. Also, as you just talked about, also that the abuser used the children as pawns in order to control the survivor. And a lot of times the abuser may have the financial resources that the survivor does not have. But one of the great things about Hubbard House, and Latrina talked about having that court advocate. We have advocates at our court, at the courthouse, that can assist them with that. We have injunction attorneys that help our survivors. And then we also have a community partner who assist survivors who are married to help them to get a divorce, and also help them with the legal system as it relate and in regards to their children. We also have a visitation a program, a partnership where if a survivor does have a child in common with the abuser, and again, as Ms. Latrina stated, the laws allow for both parents to have rights to those children. And so they can set up visitation, and we do safety planning with the survivor on how to bring your child to a safe location for the abuser to see that child and not see you, and have that exchange. So those are things and programs that are available. And there are so many other services that Hubbard House has and can provide to survivors, and to help them walk through this process. For myself, I only self-disclose when necessary, and I feel that it is necessary now. I did not know that there were services out there when I was in an abusive relationship. I did not know that there was help. So when I connected with Hubbard House some 18 years ago, it began my healing, because that trauma that I had experienced, and everything that you described that could happen to a survivor, Ms. Turner, is what happened to me in my relationship. But just as Latrina, I believe within myself that this was not my destiny. This is not where I am going to end up. This isn't how my life is going to end. And so I sit here today saying to survivors that we are here for you, and to give us a call, give us the opportunity to help you save your life, and to come out of that domestic violence relationship and live a violence-free life.
I'm in awe, and I admire both of you, that although you are survivors of domestic violence, you are now paying it forward.
Absolutely.
And that's what it's all about, and paying it forward seems to be helping your healing. And so I think I like that you're sharing that, so that anyone who is in an abusive situation, they'll know that there is life after being around that abuser. And I also am happy that we had not given you an opportunity to share some of the resources that are available at Hubbard House. So give you the opportunity now to say, is there anything else that you can think of? And you laid it out, the fact that they have the court liaison, and I'm going to call it liaison. That's not what you said. So, but the attorney to help them. I mean, all that, you laid it out, because those things, and oftentimes, and I haven't gotten any read any statistics on it, but I think you said it earlier, usually the abuser is the primary breadwinner, if you will. And so that person doesn't see a way out. Like, I can't afford anywhere to go. I don't have a car to get to Hubbard House. So if someone text or call and say, I need help, I don't have money for transportation, do you all make arrangements to get that person to you?
Absolutely. You do not need money. You don't need your own transportation. We're going to make that transportation for you. We're going to get you to safety. Um, and there are certain avenues that we use to do that. In addition to that, we have so just as you contact our hotline at 904-354-3114. That's the local number to our hotline, and those hotline advocates are going to talk with you. They're going to safety plan with you. And if you're ready to come into shelter, we have space and we're going to bring you into shelter. Once you arrive into shelter, you're going to meet with the victim advocate. That victim advocate is going to be working with you to help you with housing, with employment. We have a children's program. What am I going to do with my children while I'm trying to navigate through my next steps? We have a children's services program there. We have our outreach services. So you may not be ready to come into shelter yet, and you want to continue to put a plan together. You can work with our outreach advocates who will give you all the services that are provided in our shelter to those who are out of shelter, who don't need shelter right now. They may be at a safe place at a family member's house. So we're going to make sure that we safety plan with you and provide those services. So again, we have housing, we have counseling, not only for the survivor, but for their children. We have our court advocacy program, our the text line 904-210-3698 up on the screen. Also, our coach advocate to help with employment. There are so many services. Our heart program for our children and outreach. I believe I talked about our housing program. We have a housing program as well to help survivors to find affordable housing for themselves and their children. So there are so many services. So all I can say is that we're here for you. Give us a call. Give us the opportunity to assist you while you're working on healing, having a happy life, and a violence-free life.
You know, I'm hesitant to mention it, but I have to because I want to make sure women that may feel like they're some of the reports in the news. The young lady whom actually wound up killing her abuser because he raped her and so on and so, and that made a lot of headlines. I just want to make sure people understand that is not the typical development that occurs when you step up to places like Hubbard House, and it may actually offer you an opportunity to get away from that individual before you have to harm him or he fatally harms you. And I've forgotten the young lady's name, but every day I have sympathy for her because what other options did she have than what she did? One last statistics, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Turner. The CDC, the website at the CDC says 41% of women and 26% of men experience contact sexual violence. So you can go to the CDC and get some statistics as it relates to men and women with the experience of domestic violence.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. Another thing that is interesting that I read is for folks who are immigrants and may not have gained citizenship in the States, they're afraid of being deported, but they're being abused. Can you talk about that, Ms. Taylor? Or do you have any knowledge or any instance of that ever happening? The bottom line is, don't worry about that. Get out of that abusive situation.
Absolutely. We're going to provide services for all survivors, regardless of where you are, what your situation is. We're going to be there to help and assist you. our advocates work directly with immigration attorneys to provide those survivors with assistance with their immigration status. And so, again, just give us an opportunity. We will meet you where you are and help you navigate to where you want to be, which is a violence-free
environment.
Absolutely.
So I have to ask this question because we did a show a few months ago about human trafficking. Do you find there is a correlation between domestic violence and human trafficking? And that just, I don't know if there is. That thought just came up.
I don't have any statistics on that, but I can say serving at Hubbard House for 18 years, we do see that happening. And again, we provide services for human trafficking survivors as well. So to give us a call, and we work with the legal system to assist those survivors.
Well, Ms. Turner alluded to something just real quick because I know we're getting short on time. As it relates to immigrants, are you guys required by law to report people to ICE?
Not at all. No.
I just want to make sure that listening
no, we're not.
That you guys are not required.
We are not. We are there to help them as a survivor of domestic violence. So that is our main goal and purpose.
Works for me.
So this has been a very interesting topic. If you just joined us, we posted all sorts of resources for you as we talk about the victims of domestic violence. You heard from Ms. Taylor, who gave all the resources or many of the resources that Hubbard House offers. And Dr. Kane has been doing an infomercial for them by holding up their brochure.
Absolutely.
And also you heard from Miss Dowdell. What we like to do at the end of the show, and we'd love to have both of you back because we know that this is literally the beginning of a conversation. And matter of fact, I would like to even, to invite Miss Dowdell and no pressure, if even one of her children want to come up and talk about their experience. But there have been a lot of questions, Latrina, Garrett, we just didn't have a chance to answer all the questions, but everyone wants to know as we give our guests an opportunity to say their final thoughts. I'm going to tell both of you what I'd like for you to cover in your final thoughts, but you can add anything else, right? So, Ms. Taylor, I'd like for you to add anything you had not asked or mentioned yet about Hubbard House or anything you'd like to repeat. I'm going to start with Latrina because I'd like you to share your final thoughts and include how you and your children are today and in your healing and you also from your healing, Ms. Taylor, of being a victim of domestic violence.
Well, I will say, again, I will speak to the survivor.
Ms. Taylor, I want to end with you. I want to start with Latrina.
Thank you so much. Well, right now, my family is doing wonderful. I have my son's working with Jacksport. My daughter is working with Aetna. I have a daughter that's in college at FAMU. And I have a 9-year-old son and a 10-year-old granddaughter. They're 180 days apart. I call them my little turnaround because they started this newness in me that started my healing process. So my son and my children are gaining momentum in their healing because they are remembering that we're all children in some place. And I've taught them or teaching them different attachment styles that from the way they were raised as children. I gave them all that I had. Not everything was good. So I teach them to eat what's good for food and trash the rest. And that's the same thing that I'm doing. I also let them know not to sit at tables with food that's not good for them because sitting around complaining about what's being served does not make any differences. Get up. If it's not good for you, go sit at a table where you will enjoy the company. So that's how we get over things. We're just growing and blooming and trying to live out the best version of ourselves.
And what you said, you started a nonprofit. Talk a little bit about that.
I did. The nonprofit is, I started it with, it was started with Jada at Family Support Services. I'm of the Family Advisory Council over at the Center of Hope. And I saw a need in 32209 community, and we have a lot of ACEs over here, in the community. And I, as well, was an ACE. So I was like, what could I do to make a change about these adverse childhood experiences within my community? So what I did is I started taking classes on development and how our attachment styles create these patterns, and then we would turn into these adults that didn't get the attention that we needed. So I have the block leaders that I've assigned block leaders to 32209. So each block leader is taking training on how to become a TBRI caregiver. And so that's a trauma-based intervention, trauma-based relational intervention caregiver. So they let them, we learn about our past trauma, why we do what we do, and the bag that we carry. Everybody carries a little book bag with trauma from childhood in it. And instead of showing up as that trauma, we try to have some grace for each other as we work through that bag. And what we're doing is putting everything out on the table, eating what's good for food from each other's bag, and trying to heal some of those things that's not good for us. But, and we're training the children as well that they have options. Just because something is said or did to them, they have an option on whether or not they want to receive that for themselves. Because so many times I'm learning that our first interaction or our first understanding of God is from our parents. So if that be true, then everything that they tell us, we believe. And we thought if they say that we're not going to amount to anything, you're going to be just like your daddy. We're believing those things because those are the people that we trust. But now I'm teaching the children that eat what's good for food and trash the rest. If it's not good for you, if it don't make you feel wonderful, know that that's a part of mommy and daddy's bag and don't hold it against them. So that's what we're doing in 32209. We're trying to change the narrative.
I like that. It sounds like you may be working with some of my colleagues on our recast, which is a resiliency program that's dealing with the trauma that people.
Yes.
When I started working at the Partnership for Child Health, I learned more about, and I knew about the ACEs. I'm glad you said adverse childhood experiences, but when Latrina mentioned 32209, 32209 is an area of Jacksonville that I lived in at some point in life. And I am amazed. I remember in growing up how it was a thriving community. And unfortunately, it leads in so many different things that are not healthy for families. It has the most children that are removed from their households. And it's not a statistic that anyone wants to hear. So, and I don't like labeling communities because there are good people who live in those communities. They're just survivors of their experiences. Ms. Taylor, I'm going to let you wrap it up with us and talk about Hubbard House.
All right, thank you. First, I do want to thank you all so much for this opportunity. And again, I will say to the survivor that if you are experiencing physical, emotional, sexual, or economic abuse, that Hubbard House is here for you to give us a call. Our 24 hours, 7 days a week, confidential phone lines are available to you, 904-354-3114. And get connected with an advocate who can help you safety plan, to talk about how to get to safety and what that looks like for you and your family. I talked about our services. We have children's services, adult counseling, children counseling, housing program, relocation assistance, And so we have so many services that just reach out to us, and we'll be there with you every step of the way to assist you. So give us an opportunity to help change your life with our life-saving and life-changing services at Hubbard House.
Thank you. Thank you both. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts for tonight?
Well, they will be brief, unusually. I want to thank both of the ladies for having the courage to come on and discuss their not only their professional involvement but their personal involvement as it relates to domestic violence. I would like to make sure that we offer. Oh, she's put it up there. I was going to ask Ms. Dowdell to make sure she gives us her website so that anybody that wanted to come and visit her website can also take a look at their website. And we just to remind our listeners that we will be having much of this information on our website within the next 48 hours or so.
And I'd also like to remind people that these are organizations that are nonprofit.
Absolutely.
They're not for-profit organizations. So fortunately, you may not be a victim of domestic violence. However, there are a lot of families who are. As Ms. Dowdell mentioned, there are a lot of families who experience adverse childhood experiences or trauma, as both ladies have mentioned. Consider donating to these organizations, and not just a one-time donation. Make it a routine, regular donation to the organizations. Nonprofits, in my opinion, are the backbones of communities because they are interfacing with the community directly. Tonight's topic was one that was very important. It's one that saddens me to hear the experiences that the ladies had, and to hear what so many people experience on a day-to-day basis. It may be the person sitting next to you at work, sitting next to you or near you at church. As we learned tonight, the abuser or the person being abused, you may not see an outward appearance of it. They may not show up with the black eye that Latrina mentioned. So just get to know people, embrace people. If you see something different in them, if you saw that they had a vibrant personality and all of a sudden it changes, try to take that person off to the side. And if they are not accepting your help, slide them the phone number 904-354-3114, and that's Hubbard House. For all of you who are listening, take care of yourself and each other, and stay tuned next week as we continue an important discussion about what's happening and what could benefit you and your family. Thanks again, Ms. Taylor and Ms. Dowdell. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, ladies. Good night.
Good night.